Ladies, gentlemen, and my often forgotten, but certainly not by me, Dominion Minds, welcome to the channel and welcome to my hard mode Carapax solo guide, Magic Edition. In this guide, I'll be showing worn equipment and inventories, some tips and tricks, and I'll be doing some live kills with commentary to show my thought processes as I'm doing the boss. This guide will be covering my personal rotations and other things of the sort and not really claim to try and be anything of best in slot or fastest kills or anything like that. I do happen to use pretty much best in slot magic gear, however I will have, per usual, a budget preset option that I will also be exploring and experimenting with and showing how I would tackle this boss with some more affordable equipment. A quick note on the budget gear, it is not, the lowest or cheapest gear possible that I could use to kill this boss as a challenge, but more of what I believe an accurate representation is of someone progressing through the game and being at this point in the gear preset to then take on that boss. I will admit that the budget gear version in this guide specifically, it is a bit more difficult than, say, going to Raksha or something. However, the rewards are pretty high here, being that staff pieces at time of recording are anywhere from 1.3 to 1.7 bill, and you could easily make this a lot easier. You could easily decrease the difficulty of this boss by going in a duo or a trio encounter. Without further ado, though, let's go ahead and hop right into this guide. Alrighty, so starting off with the two presets I've put together for Carapax. The one on the right is my standard preset that I use. It's been updated just a smidge because of Vigor now being a passive, so I went ahead and tossed the wrist wraps in there just as a switch. I'm still getting used to it. I don't use them too often, however, they are now in there. But overall, it's a rather simple preset for magic, being that you just really need your armor and main jewelry and whatnot, dual wield in two-hand, maybe a swap or two. The T88 there is a lunging swap. I have that for the echoes that spawn on P4 to make combust not as bad of an ability to use, and if you're using wrist wraps, lunging is effective for increasing the damage of the wrist wraps when using combust. As far as food is concerned, I like to use blue blubbers and regular brews. That's just to help to cut on cost a little bit. I used to use super brews a lot, however I was finding myself not really needing them, so I just use the regular Sarah brews. The rune pouches just have the standard setup according to PVME, and that allows for all spell usage when being on the ancient spellbook. Vitpot is very important for P4, specifically for the methods that are used there, and I'll explain that when we get into the later parts of the video. But other than that, it's a pretty standard setup. The EOFs have G-Staff and ABS in them, or Armado Battle Staff. The one that is equipped currently with the Ornament Kit, that is the Armado Battle Staff one, and the one that's the same color dyed but without the Ornament Kit in the inventory, that is the G-Staff one. Now, you don't need G-Staff here, honestly. The accuracy is more than enough, especially if you're on task. And a lot of people will switch out and use the Z-Staff instead of the G-Staff to kind of help mitigate a little bit of damage, because both will do the same damage output. However, the Zamorak Staff will decrease Carapax's magic level, which can cause him to splash a little bit more often and to cause his magic hits to do a smidge less damage, which some people happen to find pretty useful on Phase 4 when he's kind of overcharged up and really doing a lot of damage to you. But other than that, standard things such as Bladed Dive and whatnot, and other than that, on the Elite Tectonic, it is just standard perks on there: Impatient 4, Biting 4, Crackling 4, Relent 5, and Invigorating 4, because with FSOA, the extra 0.5% of adrenaline on autos, I think it's 0.5% adrenaline, but when you're spamming FSOA, that extra adrenaline does add up over time, and it's really nice. Grim is just to help out with crit chance on that preset, and on the left, in the budget preset, it's just kind of a downscaled version. Now, my normal preset uses Calgarian Demon to help out with crit chance. However, Crit chance isn't really as helpful if you're not using FSOA, so on the budget preset, I went ahead and went with a Ripper Demon setup. Now, everything, as you can see, is just kind of downscaled. I just realized I have the T90 boots in the preset. That's my bad. The upgrade for the Blast Diffusion boots is pretty much pointless, in my opinion. I think it adds 1 magic strength. I think that's all it adds, and maybe a smidge armor. It does not make a difference. You don't need the T90 boots at all. Just use the regular Blasty Boys, and you'll be just fine. And on the more budget-friendly preset, I went ahead and put Channeler's Ring in there just because I wasn't sure on how accuracy would play out with regards to the echoes on P4, because I do this boss strictly on task. I never go off task here. The Nodon Dragonkin task lasts a long time because it only uses Carapac's death at the end is the only thing that counts for the task. None of the echoes count for it, so it works nicely there. However, that brings up a few challenges when it comes to accuracy at this boss, being that Reaver's Ring has a negative impact on accuracy. So I wasn't quite sure on how the accuracy would play out. I didn't really touch an accuracy calculator too much. If you want, I'll leave a link below to the accuracy calculator, as well as a couple other helpful pages on the wiki, and a couple screenshots, most likely, of just other things, where you can play with it and put your exact setup in there, and it'll tell you what percentage accuracy chance you have at a given encounter with whatever gear setup you want. However, I just wanted to play it safe, so I put Channeler's Ring in there. If you have Ring of Death, feel more than free to use a Ring of Death in its place. And that's about it, honestly, for the budget preset. It's just a downscaled version. And, oh, one more quick note on the budget preset. You can go ahead and swap out the helm and probably the cinders, or even bring a 3-way switch with some tank armor. So say you have some Ganodermic or something. If you're really struggling at this boss on P4 and you're not used to taking the 3 to 5k magic hits, and you're trying to learn, you can go ahead and swap out the helm, gloves, and boots for some type of tank gear, either something like Ganodermic, or you have the Sea Singer equivalent, or something along those lines, and then you can use the Animate Dead spell, and it will help with damage reduction at the boss. However, in testing, I did not find it necessary with the budget preset to use Animate Dead. The damage intake was fine compared to the output, and I was able to get kills with just proper rotations. And in the live segment later on, when I'm doing commentary on kills, I'll show exactly what I'm doing, so eventually you'll be able to do it. However, there's nothing wrong with using Animate Dead to get you started on kills here. So moving on to relics used at Carapac. For both presets, I used the same relics. Funny enough, in testing, I actually left my Elite Dungeon relics on, so it was kind of a worse setup than what I'm actually going to be using for this guide here. Death Ward is nice for damage reduction. If you're starting to take a beating at a boss, it'll help you take the edge off of those hits to make it more survivable and help you out as far as damage reduction is concerned. And Fury of the Small is nice for both presets, being that extra adrenaline is always helpful. Even though FSOA can generate basically infinite adren, FSOA can be kind of helpful, although it's not really necessary for that specifically. For the non-FSOA preset, the budget one, I did find it much more useful, and it made me a lot more relaxed when getting out of rotation, because I didn't have to think as hard about, do I have a Dren to do this, or press this threshold at this time, or do something like that. It just made life a little bit simpler for me. The big ticket item here is Conservation of Energy. That is the main relic that I use. Now, this does assume 120 Archaeology, being that I have the 650%. However, you could simply just run Conservation of Energy and one or the other. You could go with Death Ward and Conservation with like Font of Life or something to fit into the 550 energy, or just play around with something like Fury of the Small, Death Ward, and maybe Berserk Fury, you know, just play around with the relics. However, conservation of energy is very nice. Alrighty, so getting into some of the more miscellaneous information and kind of tips and tricks and whatnot, I went ahead and put my bank preset on screen just to show the preset that I use in between kills here. Now, there's a bunch of stuff here, however, it's just mostly as like a PVM prep type preset that I just have on my 2 key. It's always the second preset, so I always load it kind of in between bosses, just anywhere I go. I have my rune pouches there with the corresponding runes next to them to make pouch filling rather easy, and also it can give you guys representation of which runes I have in which pouch. The 3 sticks I use are Quarm, Lantidime, and Spirit Weed. Quarm helps with poison damage. Lantidime extends the weapon poison, and Overload, any potion that goes over 6 minutes per dose, it'll boost that to 8 minutes, which I find nice for just keeping a kind of like a peace of mind type thing, especially if you're learning this boss and your kills are kind of going into the longer times. It definitely makes life easier to keep it just under 1 sip of Overload, so you don't have to think about it as much. And Spirit Weed makes Ripper spam a lot easier in regards to the more budget-friendly preset. And as far as Calgarian goes, it's honestly not too necessary for Calgarian. However, I just do it anyway, just so if I accidentally spam my Calgarian, it'll regen faster. And I also have Summoning Renewal there as well to help with that. So the potions to the right of the incense sticks are an Ogre Flask. I just fill them up at Uglog with the thermal bath. Cool. I just fill them up there, and I have one in the preset. It stacks with Bonfire, so you just have an extra bit of HP on your, for basically nothing. It's just a easy free HP, and that's what the Crypt Bloom and whatnot is for, is to help with HP boosting when doing a Bonfire. It's not a big difference, but it technically is there, so I just tossed it in the bank preset anyways. I do have an Overload and a Weapon Poison triple plus and a Summoning Renewal in the preset. Some bosses I do, I will Overload from the bank, go do a kill, and Overload from the bank again just to help out with inventory. However, at Karapak, it's not that big of a deal, being that the inventory space honestly isn't too cramped. There's a decent amount of leeway in a preset for Karapak, so feel free to use or do whichever you need. However, I just thought I'd put this information of a bank preset in here just to make life a little bit easier. One final thing I wanted to add in here is that this boss can be done on a Slayer task. If you get the Nodon Dragonkin Slayer task, I just get the task. I just go to the Slayer Master at Anachronia, and that's where I get my tasks from, and I also have 120, so I'll just bring my 120 cape to help get a task pick, or a chance at a task pick to help get this task more often. And I believe you get anywhere from 100 to 140, or I think that's the range of the task, so it will last you more than enough for a while to do this boss. And if you have your Slayer Helm on the stand in Anachronia, you will get the accuracy and damage buff from that, and it will be effective on Karapak. However, it does not work on the echoes on phase 4, so it's kind of a blessing and a curse, kind of blurst, if you will, being that accuracy on the echoes is kind of high for some reason. I notice even in a best in slot preset, I will still switch to Channeler's Ring, just so I don't have to sit there and bother with G-staffing each of them, or if you run Z-staff in an amulet, you're not going to have it. So I just bring a Channeler's Ring as a swap, even on Maniacal, to help out with accuracy on those. But the kind of nice thing about it is they don't count towards the Slayer task, so it's just, if you get a task of 125 Nodon Dragonkin, that's 125 Karapak solos you can do. Another helpful thing to do in terms of perks and armor is if you have a free slot somewhere on your armor, say with Invigorating or Impatient or something like that, you can put Genocidal on your armor, and you will gain the benefits that Genocidal has in terms of damage. That effect will work on Karapak It's something kind of niche, but it is helpful. It is there, and if you have the room on your armor, it is definitely worthwhile to go ahead and put that on there. I will sometimes just do I'll have a kind of a stockpile of equipment separators and kind of swap perks out accordingly, or on a separate leg, like on my Elite Dungeons armor, I used to have in Vig4 Genocidal, so I would just use that set of legs instead of the normal set. There's a few ways to get around this. However, wherever you can fit it on your gear, if you have the space and time, go ahead and put that on there, and it will be a little bit extra helpful. Alrighty, so now we're going to move into the live commentary portion of this guide, being that I'm going to do an example kill for you guys, and you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing, and I'll be talking as I'm doing the kill. In the upper left-hand corner, I have my keyboard inputs with an overlay, as well as a webcam for the keyboard, per usual. Real quick, I'll just talk kind of a general picture of Karapak's mechanics. Phase 1 through Phase 3, it is basically the same rotation. He will do 3 auto attacks, then a special attack. The first 3 autos will be magic, and then he will do his first special, which, to avoid it, you just walk under while doing a channeled ability, and then you can run out, and it completely negates the little time things, the time rifts that can pop up you have to kill. If you mess up the walk under, I'll show the timing, obviously, it's the method that I use, but if you mess that up, then a time rift will spawn, and the direction it goes to on the encounter, like in the area, is dependent. Draw a line from Karapak to you, and then it shoots out in that direction and goes to the edge of the encounter. So just keep that in mind. However, honestly, if I mess up that mechanic, I usually just teleport out and start over. After that, it'll be 3 more magic autos into the slam attack. I have the passive ring. It's a pretty important thing to have for Karapak. It makes it so you don't have to wear the Pontifex Shadow Ring. It's really nice, and it makes the slams not stun you. So I forgot to mention that in the gear equipment. However, I view it as pretty important for doing hard mode solos. It makes life a lot easier. And for the slam attack, I just run under, and that allows on Phase 2 and Phase 3 that if you run under on the first one, like basically death dot right on top of Karapak when he does the first slam, that'll make sure that on Phase 2 and 3, the echoes or the clones don't come up and additionally slam down and do extra damage to you. So go ahead and get ready here, get some adrenaline. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into this. And then after that, it'll be 3 mage autos, and then it'll go into the lightning spec, which is just a wall that you dodge, kind of like QBD's firewall mechanic. You just look at the direction it's going and basically bladed dive surge through it if you have to. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, these are not going to be fast kills on this preset. It's just going to be kind of casual type of kills. But without further ado, I go ahead and surge from the start point, and then when you surge again, that's what starts the encounter. So I always do the same thing here no matter what. Have my planted feet equipped. The scripture is on. Let's go ahead and start this. So I surge, get my Vuln Bomb ready, wait for him to say always you, and then target cycle with Smoke Cloud into a G-Conk, D-Breath, third ability. Then I go ahead and run under and use Asphyxiate to hold myself under him, and then toss a Wild Magic out. The G-Conk, Omni, hit another threshold. Auto D-Breath into a G-Staff, just for some damage. Auto G-Conk. And here, I'm going to go out, fix again. You just have to run 3 tiles out. That's all you have to do. And you don't want to stay under and tank with Devotion, because if you do that, when he's holding a position like there, you do half damage to him, so it's just something to keep in mind. And another Omni, just do some threshing. Mind your prey flicking. Then here comes the staff spec. On this preset, I typically don't lightning skip. It is possible if you're very poignant about your rotation. However, it's pretty simple to just, you know, bladed dive surge through. And we'll go ahead and revuln, just as prep for the next phase. Now on these phases, I do time warp suns. So here, as soon as it comes up, extra action button, click, start a sun, go into a G-Conk, Wild Magic, Fix, and then as this comes up, I preemptively click right-click on Walk Under, Wild Magic as he slams the staff down, and then into a Auto Asphyx. That is a little bit tick timing there. However, if you just immediately Asphyx under him, then you will just be held in place as that attack is dealt with. Go ahead and hold under, so that way there's no clones for phase 3. And it's just a matter of dealing damage. Do some thresholds. And he has a bit of health, so we'll just keep threshing. Make sure to spam your Ripper. That's something I always forget to do, honestly. And as you notice, we're not really taking too much damage here. As long as you mind your prey flicks and deal with the mechanics accordingly, there's a lot of open time to soul split. Now on phase 2 and 3, I kind of look where the connection point is of the two walls. And just that's what I use as a guide to bladed dive surge into it. So that way I'm not having to, you know, dodge individual walls. I just go through where it's kind of connected. If you get really unlucky with it, maybe we'll see that later. There's kind of different things you can do, but just avoid them. Go ahead and do a Time Warp Sun. And for some reason, I used my Wild Magic, so I'll just release it with Deado. Walk Under, doing this fix. As you can tell, I do not really plan out rotations. They're very much improv-based, which I feel is what most people do in this game. But definitely the spreadsheet wizards out there are probably cringing at the rotations I use. But as long as you're getting a good number of thresholds off in your sun, and you get the kills, you know, what more can you ask for? And we'll go ahead and prep for P4. She did a decent amount of damage for this preset. My problem is I still forget to spam Ripper. Or I usually forget to spam Ripper. So here we actually got a really nice spawn. This is kind of like the ideal one. Yeah, they're all connected at that point there. You just Surge Bladed Dive through, and you're done dealing with it. Now once you get to 50k, P4 starts, and this is where I kind of follow a stringent rotation. So feel free to watch back this part as much as you need to. Go ahead and get started. Now I like to go to the north one here, immediately click Bit Pot, and then go to the second one while putting some bleeds on that one. Then here I'll do a Time Warp Sun attacking this guy. And the goal here is to kill this one as fast as possible so this guy can teleport. I'll go ahead and G-Conk into a Omni, Wild Magic, and I'll go ahead and toss an Ice Auto, mind my HP, and see he's able to teleport away, because when these clones die, that's what enrages Carapac. So here, this is probably where you're going to use the most amount of food. You can kind of hope for Enhanced Devoted procs, and you just want to kill these guys as fast as possible. Thresholding, using your G-Staffs. And then here, I just run over. I'll wait for this hit to come in, then snag a res from that. Build back up to 100 on this guy. And I'll go ahead and A-Pot here just so I can get a Devotion off. Luckily, I got Enhanced Devoted. And we'll go ahead and get off a Tsunami just so we get the crit chance. I did not time my attack well, however, it doesn't matter. But we just need to get this guy dead. And just be mindful of your HP. Now we have Devotion again because we used it before the Time Warp. And we just Threshold here until he's dead. You can Soul Split Flick if you want. Go ahead and go for a res. food. This is definitely a slower example, but it's proof that this preset does work just fine. As long as you're calm and just keep doing damage, you'll be just fine. Now, that was kind of on the slow end, a 6-minute kill. And with this preset, I have done 530s and 540s. However, if I'm going to be doing commentary, it's going to be slightly slower because I'm focusing on what I'm doing and kind of trying to say what I'm doing. But that is an example kill with this preset. Some tips and tricks to keep in mind is that keeping calm at this boss is key. If you freak out and you really let your nerves get to you, that's when the most mistakes are going to happen. So just try and keep your nerves down and focus on just getting through the phases, and dealing with mechanics accordingly. Once again, I'll go ahead and go over the mechanics. So phase 1 through phase 3, oh, I started another kill. Oops, let me teleport out real quick. I'll go back into the instance just as a demonstration to make it a little bit easier. Go ahead and rejoin. And I'll just stand here so he doesn't start the fight. So phase 1 through phase 3, I usually will stay in this area and sometimes move around based on where lightning patterns are. Sometimes you'll get lucky and the wall will actually spawn up in this area or over here or kind of on this diagonal. So that way you can keep Carapac in this area just to make life easier. However, if you're moving around, as you can tell, it's not that big of an issue. Phase 1, I just do a Apot Sun, and I do the 3 basics into a Tsunami, and then run under for my Asphyx to avoid the Time Rift kind of shooting off in whichever direction, and then having to deal with that. Because if it shoots off, it has 15k life points, and it will hit you for typeless damage, and it's pretty obnoxious to deal with. Plus, on phase 2 and phase 3, a Echo will spawn and then feed in a bunch of magic hits. So if you're trying to stand under to avoid it and then you have to run back out, it's really obnoxious. And honestly, just right-click walk under and then use something like G-Conk or Asphyxiate, or if you're worried about like Revo sniping something, if you're using Revolution, you can just walk under and use something like Cease to make sure you're not attacking anymore. However, if you time it right, Asphyx will last more than long enough to deal with it, and it's just getting used to the timing of that attack. Afterwards, it'll be 3 more magic hits, and you go into the slams. If you have the passive Pontifex Shadow Ring, highly, highly recommend it. I can't recommend it enough for here because it takes the stuns away from his slam mechanic. So, as you could see, all I had to do was just walk under with Protect Melee up and allow that to avoid other echoes spawning in phase 2 and 3 for the slams. And it made life really simple. Then you just run out 3 to 5 squares, and that's what allows him to stop the every tick melee autos, and then start his second slam and then his third slam, etc, etc. And then it goes into 3 auto attacks for magic, and then the lightning attack, which is just kind of like a QBD wall fire except extreme. Now, one thing that is important to note about the lightning walls is that the hitbox for them actually is slightly in front of them. So if you think about like Ambassador, for example, some of the hitboxes, like you can stand in the beams on the Roomba phase. Like you can stand in the beams and not get hit, but if you go behind that one that you stand in and you're not touching it, you get absolutely blasted by it. The same thing at Carapac happens here, being that if a lightning wall is coming towards you, the tiles you want to actually avoid, like you could be standing 2-3 tiles in front of it and it would start hitting you. However, if you're standing behind it and you're touching what looks like the lightning, you're not actually in contact with the hitbox. So it is definitely better to Surge Bladed Dive through them sooner rather than later. So just keep that in mind on the lightnings. And then as long as you're getting through and dealing with mechanics accordingly, phase 1 through phase 3 should be no problem for you. Phase 4 is where it really kicks off, and if you just follow the method that I do pretty much the same thing all the time, being that I teleport into the guy on the north and use my vitality potion. The reason I do that is if you vitality up one of the little clones here that are clones of you, the HP will not go away. He will be at 20,000 HP for the as a max HP threshold for the rest of the time until he falls over. So you can then teleport over to this one, and then I usually use this point right here, where the two lines connect. I use that as kind of a rough area to mark where I should put my sun. I usually stand on either this tile or maybe this one or this one, and it allows you to use your sun for both of these echoes. Then for the time warp sun, I click time warp, wait 1 tick, then hit sunshine, go into a G-Conk and immediately try and wild magic is fix on this echo right here. And then when I get all the adrenaline back, just toss an Omni Power and probably another Wild Magic, maybe another G-Conk or something like that. Just make sure this one dies before the south one dies. Because each time one of the clones die, that is what gives Carapac more enrage, and the more enrage he gets, the more damage he will do to you, and it stacks up pretty quickly. Then, just use what's left of your Sunshine to then kill the second Echo. Run over and then just grab a res as you're running over. Be mindful that when you kill this one, if he's shooting an auto attack, you just have to be mindful of where it is in relation to you. And wait to res kind of over here. And just be mindful of your HP and whatnot, you know. You don't want to take off your prayer to snag a res just for it to be nullified by another inbound hit that kind of hits you on roughly the same tick. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. And then another time warp sun right here, and I use A-Pot to just help get devotion off faster, so it makes life a lot easier. Double devotion when you're over here will very much help for dealing with the magic autos that are hitting you. If you're a little bit slow on these two, this one will probably die and start attacking you before you get devotion up. Just food to mouth during that until you can get devotion off. If you really want to, you can limitless into devotion if it's a dire situation. However, I have not found it very necessary for this preset, or I haven't run into that issue yet. After that, if you kill this Echo before your first devotion runs out, you can just keep an eye of it in your buff bar. This will count as a devotion extension, and you will get an extra 5 seconds on it. So it kind of incentivizes to kill this one as fast as you can. However, if you missed it like I did in this example, it's not the end of the world. So after that, you just start thresholding and damaging Carapac, going for reses as you need them, and using your second devotion to help mitigate your food usage. And for this one, I did use a bit more food than I usually do with this preset. I used 2 brews and a couple sips, and it looks like I used, what is that, 5 blubbers? That makes sense. Anyways, hopefully this was helpful, and let's go ahead and move into the my personal preset that I used. Alrighty, so getting into my actual preset here, this is my preset that I use for just farming out kills here in kind of a relaxed manner, using Calgarian Demon and all the other fun bits. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and build up some adrenaline and go ahead and get into a kill. I've always liked to just preemptively charge a Disrupt Shield, however, it's not really necessary. Go ahead and Surge. And for the encounter, I always like to surge, and then I do a second surge, and that's what starts the encounter. And what I like to do, the same thing every time, is I'll surge, wait for him to say the always you part in the line of text that he says, and then I'll throw a Vuln Bomb down with the sun, and then target cycle Smoke Cloud into usually a D-Breath or maybe a Bleed. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into a kill. Surge. That. Target cycle. 3 basics. Staff spec. And go ahead and swap over to Xang. And I always tend these under Omni Power, Wild Magic. Do this fix, and I'll go ahead and go into a ABS spec, another G-Conk, into another ABS spec. Here I'm happening to get quite a decent amount of damage out, so deal with that accordingly. And here, I'll honestly just thresh and whatnot. I don't really start another sun or anything. I know this isn't the most efficient by any means, but I just kind of hang out, chill, and wait till he does this, and then I see that my sun's coming off cooldown, so now I'll pop out, start a Time Warp Sun, get off a few basics, another more, and get off these Tsunami. Okay, good, I actually did hit it. I thought I pressed Detonate for a second, and then immediately go into a Staff spec. And then I go ahead and Tendies under. Swap back to Xang. And then go ahead and get some fix. And here, I just kind of do the same thing. I thresh the start, wait a little bit, and then I start the sun when he does his first spec. Time Warp. Got a Relent proc here, that's kind of nice, so I'll go ahead and Tsunami, and just use Omni Power to get some extra damage. And I'll go ahead and hit a second Omni Power. I'm just waiting for my Staff spec to come off cooldown. Being that I don't really need it for the start of P4. The main objective here is just to get him before he does his lightning skip or attack. I canceled my thing there. And then we go into P4. I immediately go to the north guy, Vit Pot. Double bleed on this guy. Time Warp into a sun. Tsunami, and then I like to Ice Rack here, just for funsies. And then Omni Power, Wild Magic, and his Fix, just to make sure this guy died. And here, I just kind of use my Detonate, release with an Ice Rack, into a G-Staff there. Ice Rack, another G-Staff, just kind of have fun with it. Alright, and then I run across and I'll snag a res from Care Pack here, just to help out with HP management a bit. Wait for my Time Warp to come up. There it is, and start another Time Warp Sun. And on the fourth ability, I like to Devotion, Staff Spec, and just for funsies, I'll hit an Omni Power. And then target cycle over. Devotion, because it's back. And just DPS him until he's dead. Ray Flick there is what it is. Just go ahead and Disrupt Shield one of the autos, and he's dead before you know it. So, I was a little bit quiet there during that. Honestly, that was my first... Funny enough, that was my first Carapac kill, probably since a few months ago. I have not touched this boss a whole lot. However, I figured it'd be a good idea to come back and do a guide here. And the few kills I was doing here were with the budget presets. So, now I'm just going to kind of go over what I did there, because I know I definitely missed a few things, and definitely need to go over a few things. So, to start off with the first sun, I do just a standard A-pot sun, kind of like I do in my magic DPS guide, that same rotation. Being that I start off with, I'll sun with a vulnerability bomb, and then target cycle, smoke cloud with a basic. Usually I'll hit Corrupt Blast or Dragon Breath, and that'll count as my first basic. Then I'd usually do G-Conk into D-Breath, And that's the second, third basic. Then I'll Tsunami, Staff Spec, and if I get enough Adrenaline, I don't have to Limitless. However, most of the time I don't, and then I run under, because that's when it comes time to run under to avoid the first special attack, because he's already gotten his 3 autos out, and he's ready to slam down and rain hell on you with the Time Rift thing. But if you run under, that completely nullifies it, so running a channeled ability under him will keep you there instead of forcing you out. So something like Smoke Tendrils or Asphyxiate, something like that, or G-Conk, those 3 abilities will hold you under. Even though Armidal Battle Staff in the EOF is considered a channeled, it will run you out. Weapon specs, for whatever reason, it will run you out from under him, so just keep that in mind and use basically Tendrils to get a bunch of Adren. After that, I just go for Wild Magic and Omni, a 2-hit Asphyx, and a bunch of ABS specs. And where I differ from a lot of people, and, I'm not the fastest at this boss by any means. I don't get down in the 330s, 325s for kill times, I don't do this boss as fast or as efficiently as possible by any means. This is just what I came up with, and kind of is a relaxed rotation for me to farm out a bunch of KC at this boss and try and make some good money. With that in mind, I do use Time Warp for Phase 2 and 3 on my Suns. However, I do wait for Sun to come off cooldown Phase 2, so I'll just start off with kind of like a Detonate released with a Wild Magic or something else, and kind of just improv my rotation until Sun is off cooldown, and then once it's off cooldown, which is typically when he's trying to do his first special attack again, that's when I go ahead and do a Time Warp Sun. And my Time Warp Sun rotation is always pretty much the same. I will go for a 2 or 3 basics, depending on how much adrenaline I get, and then get off the Tsunami and maybe one other ability. Tsunami is usually the 4th or 5th. It's usually the 3rd or 4th ability. In the Time Warp window, you can technically get off 5, but that's if you're constant spamming every 3 ticks and get it off perfect. If you have any sort of lag, that won't work. Which, for me and my internet connection, that happens more than I want to admit. After that, immediately go into a staff spec and just go to town afterwards. And for Phase 3, you kind of just repeat the same process. I like to hold off on my Sun. I'll Thresh until he does a spec. Get off a Time Warp Sun. And as you can tell, Lightning skips with FSOA, even on, quote-unquote unoptimal rotations. Lightning skips are more than doable, especially if you're on task. And then Phase 4, I follow pretty much the same rotation as always. I Vitpot the guy up north, the little clone you teleport into, then teleport to the middle one, and run to where these 2 lines meet. I usually go on this tile, right in this area, because it allows your Sunshine to attack both of these echoes. And I try and nuke this one as fast as possible by doing something like double basic or triple basic into a Tsunami, and then maybe something else, and then immediately Omni Power Wild Magic. Now, I think I forgot to equip my Channeler's Ring in the example. However, I bring this just because Reaver's Ring has a reduction in accuracy, and these guys have, for some reason, the Echoes have some decent defense. And so I swap to that just to make life a little bit easier, because if I start to chug down on Bruise, I have occasionally splashed a decent amount, so it's just a backup there. And then use whatever thresholds and whatnot. As you could saw there in the kill, I was using Ice Rat because these are stunnable and bindable targets, so you can go ahead and use Ice Barrage into a rack as a 4-tick, and it does a lot of damage on these guys. Do that in combination with G-Staff and some other thresholds, and then kill this guy before the sun goes away. Then I never really surge over. I could, but I always get limited by the Time Warp. So I always Time Warp again just to make Adren usage a bit easier, and I do a two or three basics, and then usually it's 2 with Apot on this sun over here when it's just the North Echo left and Karapak. I'll go ahead and do 2 basics, Tsunami, Devotion is my 4th ability, so it kind of offsets it a little bit. And then staff spec on tick, usually or sometimes the tick afterwards, and then kill the echo, so I get a devotion extension. Then it's just a matter of swapping over to Carapac, using your thresholds, and turning him into absolute mincemeat. And then, before you know it, your kill's done, and then before long, you'll probably have a staff piece drop. Anyways, hopefully this was helpful, and we'll go ahead and now move into the final thoughts segment of this guide. Alrighty, so just kind of doing a recap here. As you can see, the budget preset does more than enough to get kills at hard mode Carapac, which I was surprised about. They're not the fastest kills in the world, but if you're diligent about doing the boss, it's a pretty low food usage and just making sure you're doing the boss right, and you can get some pretty decent kills, anywhere from 530s to kind of in the super low 6s in terms of kill times. And just making sure you're using the time warps correct and doing P4 correctly. That preset doesn't even need animate dead. However, if you're struggling with it, of course, feel free to use 2 or 3 piece tank gear and the helm, glove, or boot slot. What you could even do is bring that as a switch in the preset. You know, maybe cut down on the number of renewals or spiritual prayers or something like that, and then just bring a couple armor pieces as a swap, and you can go ahead and do that and just swap to it for P4. I know plenty of people who do that. Nothing wrong with that there. As far as other bits of gear are concerned, obviously the boss is poisonable, so I bring cinders, and also I do bring wrist wrap swaps, although I'm still not used to using them and will tend to forget about them. So yep, other than that, it's pretty standard equipment with just normal food. If you are finding yourself not using any food at all, you could go ahead and swap to Guthix Rest with Blue Blubbers and negate the drain on accuracy that Brews can temporarily have. However, I personally will just stick to regular Brews for doing this boss. As far as methods are concerned, the ones shown in the example, phase 1 through 3, all the same. It's 3 auto attacks, 3 mage autos, his first special, which you just run under and it negates it, and you can just soul split the whole time, getting free HP. Then 3 more mage autos into the slams, the melee slams, having the passive Shadow Ring, vitally important, I think, in that use case. And it prevents the stun, so you can just run under, and it'll prevent all the stun. It'll prevent him from moving around. And if he keeps slamming into the same location, I think it's only on the first one that really matters. But if he slams on the first slam into the same location, none of the clones will spawn on phase 2 and 3, causing more melee hits to come out. It's a very nifty thing I found to do at this boss, just to make life a bit easier. And then on the budget preset, just dealing with the lightning walls. If you can skip it, more power to you. I came close a few times in testing. It was like 5 to 10k HP off of lightning skips on a couple different occasions. However, it's with that preset being on the basic perks, you know, like P6E4 and some other standard perks and whatnot, I don't see that one being consistent. But if you do a few gear upgrades, I'm sure you could make it consistent, and most people are probably going to be better at specializing that type of rotation than I am. But dealing with it is not that big of a deal, as long as you know that it does do damage, but if you deal with it correctly, it's not a big issue. And then P4, as you can see in both the budget and my normal preset, I follow the same principles, being that I always Vitpot the north clone and then go to the middle clone and run south to attack the south clone. Or the south echo, I should say. And I always do that, and I always time warp sun both of them. Some people who are very fast at the boss will not wait for time warp sun for the echo that's north and Carapac. They'll just A-pot there and go balls to the wall in terms of damage and just full send it. And that is a strat you can adapt. However, I like to just play it safe and chill and go for a time warp with the devotion and double devotion. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you, Dominion Minds. Thank you very much for watching. You made it to the end of this video. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate you just that much more. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, night time, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide or video. Peace.